Alright, so we're over at Keith's place today getting ready for Trail Recon Summit 3. And we're working on his Jeep today, Tank, trying to get it ready. We've got a number of things to do, so let's check it out here real quick. So this is Tank. You guys have seen it before. So we got a few things going on here. Number one, that battery is smoked. Actually had it on a charger and it started literally smoking. So got a few things that we're working on here. We got Josh over here doing some wiring. We're going to relocate the radio up top here so that the wire's not coming all the way back. And he's also working on a 12-volt port. So finding a few things that previous owners had done throughout the years that I'm not real happy with. So we're kind of redoing some stuff. So getting things cleaned up a little bit. So there was a 12-volt plug zip tied to this. Keith had a little fridge that he got off of Amazon and tried to plug it in, and it wasn't working quite right. So chased it down, and what he figured out was that wasn't getting proper 12 volts to it. So we're basically ripping that out, and we made a bracket for a new 12 volt with a switch, and we're going to rewire that all the way up to the battery. And then got a bunch of work to do in the back here. So this, I'll show you this back here. So he picked up some plates to attach Milwaukee pack out plates. So we're going to put a fridge in here, and then there's going to be a bunch of Milwaukee pack out plates that he's going to run in here. Some larger ones for some spare parts. He's got one that he's going to put some fluids and stuff in. And then let me show you this. This is pretty cool what he picked up. So this is the contraption he is building to mount everything to, and then mount that in the Jeep. But he just got this delivered literally while I was at my house working on the bracket for the 12 volt. But this is a, what do we call this?
A trail welder.
Trail welder.
Welder.
Yeah, so trail welder, carnage welder. So he picked that up to have on the trail, which would be pretty sweet. And it's in a Milwaukee pack out case as well, so we can just slide everything in and click it in. So it's gonna be pretty cool. So we're gonna get working on this, try to get this thing buttoned up today, ready to go for Trail Recon Summit. And I've still got work to do on our Jeep. And yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Looking forward to it. How's the wiring going?
Good so far. You helped me get it through the dash here, so now we can pull it through the firewall and button it up.
Very good. So that's the wire that's going up to the radio that we're going to relocate up to the top here. And we got another wire we got to run back to the panel we installed in the back. We'll put our 12 volt power supply with on a switch for the fridge. Keith is working away on welding up his frame for the pack out boxes in the fridge, and coming along. So I'm back in my shop now, and I got the 392 up on the lift. Got a few things I've got to get done to this thing before we're ready to go to Trail Recon Summit. One of the things that I've wanted to do for a little while is addressing some suspension issues or concerns. Really not too big of an issue, but let me show you what I got here. So I am still running factory springs on this. I did put in Terraflex spacers front and rear. Show you the front here real quick. So I put these Terraflex spacers in. I did that a while ago to help clear the 37s with it. Really didn't want to make big changes to the suspension, especially when we got this. It was brand new and there wasn't a ton out there for it yet. So we did the Terraflex spacers and the control arm drop brackets on the front, and it has actually worked pretty well. But then we added the American Adventure Lab setup to the back of this thing, and the back end is definitely squatting a bit compared to the front. So I have ordered Terraflex springs front and rear. They say on the 392s to use the 3.5-inch spring, the HD, the Outback spring, to help with the extra weight of the V8 versus the Pentastar V6, and then to use the standard springs in the rear. So I did the HD springs for the front, and I also got the HD springs, the Outback springs for the rear, trying to help with that extra weight. I'm hoping that I don't really lose a whole lot of height by going with these springs over the spacers. But I'm hoping that the HD, especially in the back, will help level this thing out a bit and get us where we need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and get to work on swapping these springs out. It's really not that big of a deal. Really should loosen up the control arms, disconnect the shock, disconnect the sway bar, and then droop the axle out so we can get this spring out, and then we can put our new spring in. Do that on all four corners, and we should be in pretty good shape. So I'm going to get started on swapping these springs out, and then we'll take a measurement afterwards. I already took a before measurement, so I've got that ready. So I'll take a after measurement once I get the springs in and see what we got. All right, so I got the new springs on the 392, and it definitely made a big difference, mainly in the rear, which is what we were wanting. So in the rear, when I measured from the center line of the wheel up to the fender, on the stock springs with the spacer lift, I was at 41 inches. Now just changing out the springs, I'm at 43. On the front, same thing, center line of the wheel up to the lip of the fender there, I was at 43 with the stock springs with the 2-inch Terraflex spacer. Now with getting rid of the spacer and just doing the HD springs, I'm still at 43 inches. So this thing is sitting much more level now. The back end isn't squatting like it was. And the big reason why it was squatting on us is all this right here. So we do have all of the American Adventure Lab stuff in the back of this thing. And while it is pretty light for what it is, it's still adding weight. And that was causing that rear end to sag. So I think I mentioned before, Terraflex on the 392 recommends doing the what they call the Outback or HD springs on the front of the 392 for the added weight of the engine over the Pentastar. But in the back, they recommend doing the standard springs. So I went, because of this, I went with the HD Outback springs for the rear as well, and it's perfect. I'm loving it. Originally, that's all I was going to do on the suspension for right now, getting ready for this trip, but I do have a bunch of other parts sitting here. Eventually, I am going to do a long arm kit on this, so I do already have the Falcon 3.3 adjustable shocks. I think I'm just going to go ahead and throw those on now. That is going to require a little bit of extra work. The shocks won't be too bad to install, but with the American Adventure Lab fender liners, when I ordered them, I didn't have the Falcon shocks. I was running stock shocks still. So I did not order them with the cutout for the Fox shocks. Or I'm sorry, the Falcon shocks. So to put the Falcons on the front, I am going to have to notch out the inner fender liners to accommodate for the remote reservoir. Shouldn't be too big of a deal. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull the inner fender liners off the front of the Gladiator, because they are the same, and they're already notched out, so I'll use that as a template to notch out what I need on the 392, get those cut out. But first things first, let's pull these inner fender liners and let's get these Falcon shocks on and see what kind of difference that makes. All right, so I've got the rear Falcon shocks in. Need to get my inner fender liner back in and make sure I've got access to the adjusting knob, which I think I will. May have to trim just a little bit, but I think if I remember right from auto, we should be okay. So the rears are in. That's a good step. And yeah, man, I had to compress the axle to get the stock shocks out, and then I had to droop it all the way to get these in. So definitely limiting the down travel with the stock shocks. And this is going to be a big improvement, I think. So looking forward to this. Can't wait to get it done and let the wife drive it, see what she thinks. So back to work. All right, so I'm running into a little bit of a problem here. So the kit, when I originally ordered it, it was going to go on auto, the gray Jeep, which I no longer have. And we decided, well, we'll just reuse it on the 392. So here's the problem, is that the shocks on the front from Falcon are different for the 4xe, the 392, and the Eco Diesel. And on the 392, the reason is this right here. You've got this piece right here, which I'm assuming is some sort of a vacuum container. And so with the remote reservoir, I try to put this in here, it hits that reservoir, and there's no way I can get it lined up with the hole, and it's going to jam into that. So they actually make one that has a shorter reservoir on it to go in there. And of course, that is the last shock I had to do. So I'm going to have to pull this all back apart and go back to the factory shocks for right now and see what I can figure out. This kind of sucks, I'm not going to lie. Damn. I was really looking forward to having these Falcons on this. Oh well, nothing I can do now. Go back to the stock shocks and we'll keep plugging along. Alright, so the new springs are installed on the 392. I did put the rear Falcon shocks on and left those. The fronts, there is an issue with it. It looks like a reservoir for a vacuum system, and I think it's what controls the exhaust valves on this thing. That interferes with the remote reservoir on the right front Falcon shock. I did call Terraflex, talk to them about it, and yes, they do make a specific shock for the 392s, the Eco Diesels, and the 4xEs that has a shorter reservoir on it. So sounds like we have a solution, but it's not going to be done in time for this trip. So I do have the stock shocks on the front. We did drive it. It's driving actually pretty good. The springs and the rear Falcons definitely made a big difference in the way this thing sits and rides. So very happy with it. So looking forward to getting those front shocks taken care of. A few more things to finish up here on the 392 before the trip. One of those being my GMRS antenna. This was attached to the hood, and somewhere along the way while the wife was driving it fell off and hung out on the fender for a little while, did a little bit of damage. So of course it is now missing some of the set screws and the plate that wedges it against the corner of the hood or the edge of the hood. So I need to see if I can figure out a better solution for mounting this thing. So I'm going to play around with it for a little bit here, see what I can figure out, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I can find a reasonable spot to mount it where it's not going to be an issue. So let's see what I can figure out. All right, so that ended up being a pretty easy fix. So at least temporarily. I'll eventually redo a little bit of it to make it a little bit cleaner, but basically what I did, I pulled it from the other side, just the wire was run from this side all the way over to the passenger side, so I brought it back and then went up along here and pulled that bracket apart and just bolted it to the light bar. So now it is up here, up high, and I think I should get some better reception out of it. So knocking some projects off the list here. I've got a few more to go. Probably the next one I'm going to do is the rear inner fender liners. So on these rear inner fender liners with the Falcon shocks, where the adjustment knob is down here, it does interfere with it. So I need to modify this inner fender liner somehow so that I've got clearance for that, and make sure that we're good there. So I'll figure that out next. Then I can get the inner fender liners back in. I've got to go through everything in the back, and then I think after I do that, I think I should be pretty good to go. Start getting things figured out, getting things packed up and ready, and kind of go from there. So big items are off the list, so that's a good thing, and we'll keep plugging away here.